thing is we want to be able to share, and they want to see how good I do as a referee, how tough I am. So with that being said, and when I talk about this framing question about white privilege being a white problem that white people need to fix, anything around that whole idea of white privilege, you don't have to match up exactly with the framing question. That's just to get the conversation off. So anything around that question, when you're speaking your 2 minutes of opinion, feel free and just share openly of your thoughts around that. And then we'll go to the questions, do some questions around that. So who would like to be first to give their opinion as to their view on that framing question? Anybody want to start? Kick us off? So too tough of a framing question?
I'll go, I guess.
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, so first of all, I got to watch myself because I'm like, my first reaction is to be overreactive, and that's probably the worst, one of my worst character traits. So
it's all right.
When I hear the question like that, I think there is such a thing as white privilege. I don't think it's up to white people to fix it. I think we're all in this together. Everybody I know and myself have felt levels of stress that we probably haven't felt ever before in our lives, no matter what age you are. From everything, missed events with loved ones, illnesses, maybe somebody knows somebody that had COVID, hearing people say completely opposite of what they believe, whether you believe one way or another about the political situation and everything. I mean, there's so many different areas coming at us at once. So I don't think it's only for white people to fix. You know, as a Christian, God doesn't love somebody more than somebody else. He loves us all the same. And he created this one human race, whether we're white, brown, black, doesn't matter. So I think we're all in this together. But I think there does need to be an acknowledgement that there has been a history of white privilege from the very beginning of our country. And I think it's clear. And, you know, I got to be honest, I didn't even hear about Tulsa, Oklahoma until recently. And I saw a conversation, just let me add there, a guy that graduated from Oklahoma University, a black dude in 1998. He had never heard of Tulsa, and he was from Oklahoma. What happened there back in 19. So that's just an example of some of the stuff we don't know about.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm with Tom on that. I never heard about Oklahoma till recently.
I mean, I hate to admit that, but I honestly never knew about that.
I never knew about it either. It was interesting.
And I've read up on all the Indian massacres and all that stuff. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Who'd like to ask? I'd be curious to know question to Tom's thoughts. Okay, Tina, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm looking where you are in the screen. Hi, Tom. I'd be curious. You said I'd be curious to know, because you said we're all in this together, what responsibility you think white people have to deal with white privilege, and what responsibility you think people who are not white have to deal with white privilege.
I think the people that feel that they, the first question was that they do have white privilege?
The question was, what responsibility do white people have to address white privilege versus people who are people of color?
I think the biggest responsibility white people have right now is to listen to black people and brown people and try to understand what they're saying. I don't think the white person needs to say, well, what about this? What about that? because basically they've been having their way since the landing on our continent 400 and something years ago. So I think right now it's important to listen for the white person. I don't think it's proper to inject what
Thanks,
they
Tom.
think ought to happen.
Thanks, Tom.
I didn't answer the second question, so.
All right, thank you. And anybody else would like to ask a clarifying question to Tom? Okay, Ginger.
Tom, I'd be curious to know what you think about the fact that when we speak of something like white privilege, we're blanketing an entire group of people based on color with an attitude and even, for that matter, a set of privileges. When some of those people, we can't tell what somebody's genetics.
Ginger, try to
Make it brief.
make it a question. You know, one because it's multiple things you're bringing out. Try to clarify that question even more.
I think I know what she's trying to get at.
Okay.
When you clump white privilege into one category, that encompasses a whole lot of people. When you say white privilege, I think of somebody, a history of racism. I was a federal employee for, well, counting my military time, over 35 years. And, you know, people talk about quotas. Well, how come the blacks are getting the jobs, you know? And there was an attempt to introduce fairness into the hiring process. And, you know, I remember back in 1971, there was a guy named Bakhti or something like at the University of California that didn't get hired. He had all these degrees, but they promoted a minority person in front of that person. I think there's been an attempt to even out the score, and as far as making people more equal.
Thanks, Tom. Sorry about that. I'm the referee. I have to keep people in that 1 minute response.
Yeah, I understand.
Keep things flowing.
That's a good question, though. That's a good question.
Yeah, great question, Ginger. Thank you. Anybody else want to clarify a question to Tom's thoughts? I'm sorry. Nima? Nice pronounce.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
David Rainwater.
Hey, David.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know, you said in like one previous statement that you think it's a good time for white people to listen to black people and people of color and see what they have to say, and that white people should be silent. But what do you say about the fact that even in the black community there are conflicting statements, and it's not like they have one unanimous say, you know, they're all saying different things, just like white people, you know, just the same way that white people say different things, so do black people. So if you're listening to a bunch of different stuff.
Nima, try to clarify that. I'd be curious to know into a question.
I'd be curious to know, how do you get a resolute and like unanimous statement from the black community when there isn't one?
Well, you're right. We all have different thoughts and views about what's happening, but the predominance of what's been happening now and the circumstances that we are seeing almost daily about black men being shot and or killed, and evidence now even coming out a year or 2 years later, what's happening, these circumstances, I feel, aren't coincidental. So that, to me, says that we have a system of not telling the truth as far as what's really happening to our society. But, you know, there are people that say not much is happening. To me, all these revelations are a wake-up call. And I feel a lot of people of color are expressing themselves with a wake-up call. You see what's happening in Bethel, Ohio. You see what's happening lately in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Little events where...
Thanks, Tom. Sorry. Thanks, Tom. We're going to do one more question for Tom, then we're going to open up to another opinion. Anybody else have a clarifying question for Tom?
I'd be curious to know, hey, Tom, I heard just a little bit of the initial statement that you made, but I want you to rewind. Let's rewind back to 1865. At that
David, can you
time,
frame that up in an I'd be curious to know question?
I'd be curious to know. Yeah.
But
So I'd
what?
be curious to know. Let's rewind back to 1865.
Okay.
So we, as a people, are not even considered 100% of a person.
Right.
So when we talk about the responsibilities of the majority, I mean, that's a great time to really put that into perspective.
David, try to get
1865,
that into try to
1865, we don't
rewind.
have the right to vote. We don't have any of those things, Tom. How is it not the responsibility of the majority, to make that happen, to make even, the Emancipation Proclamation happen?
That's good.
Yeah, you're right. I think the Supreme Court said that a black man was 2/3 of a person, something like that.
Yeah,
So
not a whole.
right, not a whole person, and very limited rights. I think the 15th Amendment was even passed around that time. But to your question, yes, the white man has failed. If you're going to pose your question to me like that, in my opinion, with the white man to work towards a more perfect union has failed. I think we don't need more laws. We had the civil rights of 57, 64, the 15th Amendment back around 1865. All these laws have been passed. And look what's happening. We have a militaristic, systemic racism embedded in our militaristic police force. And not everybody. As a matter of fact, I'd say not most everybody, but these are certainly getting in the news, and it needs to be addressed. And that's why I think the white man needs to listen to what the black man thinks needs to be done, because we have
Thanks,
had our
Tom.
chance.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to move on to somebody else's thoughts and opinion on white privilege being a white problem that white people need to fix. Anybody like to step up and give their 2-minute opinion that we can clarify?
I would be curious to know what's the panel.
David, this is if you want to, you have 2 minutes to express your opinion, then people will ask you questions. So I think you missed the intro, but we do a 2-minute, someone gives their opinion. You don't have to do a curious. You're going to give your opinion on everything you want to say about this topic for 2 minutes. And then we will clarify questions. I'd be curious to know, David, with questions to you. So this is your time to give your thoughts for 2 minutes on this topic.
Okay, so if you put it that way, not being curious to know, but it's interesting.
State your thoughts on it, 100%.
On whatever topic?
On this topic, within the white privilege idea, whatever your topic, whatever you want to express, you express this. This is your time to express your thoughts.
David, can I jump in? This is Tom.
Yeah, please do, Tom. Yeah.
I don't know, you came in a little bit late, so
Yeah.
you missed all the rules, and so you're at a disadvantage. So just in case you didn't, I'm just going to explain it to him, and I don't mean to be talking down, I just want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. So the framing question is, white privilege is a white problem and only whites can fix it. So what we're asking for you is you get 2 minutes to say whatever you want to say about that specific statement. And that's how Tom started before you came in. So you say whatever you want to, no one can interrupt you, no one can jump in. And once you've stated your 2 minutes, Rob will tell you, you're done. And then the rest of us have that chance to then ask you, I'd be curious to know. And we're only allowed to ask you those kind of questions. We can't say, this, that, or the other. We have to say, I'd be curious to know. So that's what Rob's asking. If you'd like to take your 2 minutes, we would love to hear, but it's specifically about that question. White privilege is a white problem and only whites can fix it.
Yeah, and the tail end of that, to make it a question, is, are they right? When we say that, am I right? Are we right in saying that? And then you can speak your mind, whatever around that topic you want.
Yeah, I think every element of society right now is heavily influenced by the white majority. We're talking economics, we're talking the judicial system, we're talking law enforcement. Every element of our society right now that impacts minorities is controlled heavily and influenced heavily by the white majority, making it very difficult for people of color, but specifically Black people right now, having a very difficult time to make it a level playing field. And so that's my position on that.
Anything else you want to share? You have a minute and 20 seconds left of sharing anything else you want around that.
Yeah, the only other thing I would share is just, I think in all of this, Black people are looking for the opportunity to make sure that the playing field is level, that the opportunity to, to demonstrate everything that they have to offer to society. We need that level playing field, and that simply does not exist in most areas of our society. In some it does, but not in most.
Good. Okay, David, anyone want to ask him a clarifying question? Okay, I saw Brandon first. Go ahead, Brandon.
Okay. Well, I feel bad because Matthew always puts his hand up first, and then people always forget him. Is it okay? Okay. All right. I'd be curious to know, first of all, David.
Matthew, keep your hand up so I don't forget, because I think I did that before last time.
I always feel bad for that guy because he's so kind. David, so nice to meet you, and I'd be curious to know. I'd be curious to know how you have experienced in your life any type of white privilege. Like,
yeah. So for me, this has obviously gone back my entire life, but white privilege is a funny thing because it is not always this very obvious position of racism, position of privilege. It's not always very obvious. It's so woven into our society that it makes it very easy for some people who it doesn't affect to overlook it completely. For me, it would be something as simple as from childhood memories, going into stores, being looked at longer, being followed, moving into my teen years, driving, being followed by officers for no reason at all, not speeding, not doing anything. I grew up in Bellevue, of course, like a few of the other gentlemen I know here. And so these are some of my personal experiences. There are plenty more, but within the 2 minutes, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm going to go to, because I've forgotten him before, then you, Ginger. I'm going to go to Matthew first and then Ginger. Go ahead, Matthew.
Hey, David, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Matthew.
I'd be curious to know what you mean by equal playing field.
So if I was going to describe an equal playing field, what I would say is every individual, that they're not encumbered, there is a point where we all have the exact same opportunities, that we're perceived the same way, that the opportunities exist in the same manner. That's what I would say from an equal standpoint, an equal playing field, if I was going to describe it.
Good. Thanks, David. And then Ginger.
Hi there, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'd be curious to know what you think about the idea that much of what we feel is based on our perceptions, and that just in the last week, for instance, I've seen 2 Black women who were chiefs of police of 2 major cities in the US, indicating that there are probably many others that are Black. And so I would, from my perspective, it appears that they're there. How do you feel about that? That those opportunities are there is what I'm saying.
Can you clarify that with more, just shorten it up a little bit. I'd be curious to know, and then specific to that.
I'd be curious to know how you feel when you express the idea that the opportunity isn't there, that when you see people of a background similar to yours that have risen to the highest levels. How do you feel about that?
The most difficult part of identifying white privilege is the mistaken idea that it completely shuts down all opportunity. That's not what it is. What we're saying is the opportunity that is presented to the majority, the ability to be able to enter into that opportunity at the same level, social, economic, education, to enter it at the exact same level without the encumbrances that have been created by the systemic racism within our society. The ability for those people, I mean, it doesn't mean that they can't achieve a goal, that they can't reach a goal. The skin color simply makes it more difficult to do that.
Okay, thank you both. All right, and I saw Diane first and then Nima. Diane, and then we'll go on to, go ahead, Diane.
Hi, David.
Hey, Diane.
Good to see you. I was brought up never to see color.
Yeah, Diane, we had to ask because I'd be curious.
I have one question though. I have a grandson now that's biracial. What do I need to teach him?
Yes, I'd be curious to know how to teach my biracial grandson. Yeah, that's good. Good.
You're fortunate because you get to walk in both worlds. It's a great world to walk in. And so from my standpoint, I would make sure that culturally that your grandson has an opportunity to experience the benefits of both cultures. Maximizing, you know, obviously both cultures have a lot to give, and I would cheat him out of none of those. I mean, I would equally do that, but I would also make him very aware of historically what has taken place in the country as far as Black people, as far as the perception of Black people, as far as the opportunities given to Black people, as far as the challenges that have been created, you know, for Black people specifically in some cases. And so those are the things that that I would make sure that they knew. But after that, I would shower him and enjoy life with your grandson. And don't make that, I mean, don't be robbed of the joy of just loving and being with and enjoying your grandson.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David. Love you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Anne.
So we'll do Nima and then one other question for David, then we'll move on to another thought. Go ahead, Nima. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Hey, Nima.
How's it going? I'd be curious to know when you mentioned how the majority sets the rules pretty much. What are the biggest barriers of entry that you see for the color community to be able to pretty much write their own fate, like to be able to change the rules or to be able to make it an even playing field, to be able to have those high post positions that would be able to.
Sure. Unfortunately, there's not a snapshot. It's difficult to take a snapshot right now in 2020, Nima, and say, boom, what don't you have that we don't have? You have to rewind this whole thing. And I hate to take you back to 1865, but you have to understand that within America, you had 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation of, you know, defined Jim Crow. Really, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't worth the paper it was written on in practicality. It was in actuality, but not in practicality. It was not being exercised. You know, when you have a republic, states get an opportunity, you know, to create laws and to you know, to act on those laws as they will. And so there are so many areas of our country that Black people still didn't have an opportunity, a fair opportunity, from an education standpoint. Again, from a hiring standpoint.
Good. Thank you both on that. And then one more question for David. Tom?
Hey, David. Excuse me. Nice to meet you, David.
Hey, Tom.
Sorry. Hey, I would be curious to know, as you've talked about rewinding and learning, you know, understanding, going back and understanding. So I'd be curious to know, for white folks who are maybe just figuring out that white privilege is even a thing, do you have any favorite books or podcasts or authors that you would direct someone to that you think are worth hearing to help folks understand what this means?
I really can't put my finger on one right now specifically, but there have been champions. And I think this is going to be one of those seasons in life where champions are going to come forward. Yes, you'll have some out of the entertainment community. You'll have some out of the, the sports community. But I think these battles and, these acknowledgements are going to be won, in just a town, people that stepping forward, much like we're doing right here, being willing to openly discuss these things. And then again, if they come to that realization, acknowledging it, and then putting something productive, moving forward from there. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right. We're going to move on to another 2-minute. Who wants to give their 2-minute? I saw Tina's hand.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the clarifying question is white privilege is a white problem and white people need to fix it. Are we right in saying that? And that's the clarifying question.
Thank you.
Ready?
Oh, okay, I'm going. All right. You ready?
Yeah.
So I think white privilege is a problem for everybody. And I don't think that white people alone can fix it for a couple of reasons. One, I think white privilege is the air that white people breathe and the water in which many white people swim. And therefore, it's very hard to even understand what it is unless you have the benefit of having close friends and family who are non-white. So I think it's difficult then for white people to fix a problem that they benefit from and that they maybe cannot clearly see because they haven't had many of the experiences that people of color have had. And second of all, I think often some white people rush in and try to fix problems and without understanding the problem. The other is that white privilege is a system of power on which our country is built. And therefore, to dismantle that system, you're asking the people who created that system and who benefit from that system to dismantle it. And that is, I'm not sure how realistic that ask is and if people will voluntarily really give up their power, give up all of their white privilege. It's one thing to talk about it and discuss it and listen. It's another thing to actually take the steps and the actions to create equity in our society. And I don't know if white people, I mean, I'm generalizing now, but I'm not sure if that's something that white people can do on their own and actually will do on their own. So I think it's going to require people pushing them, forcing them to do that. And also it's going to require people helping them helping white people see what white privilege actually is.
Thank you so much, Tina. Anybody, okay, so thanks, Tina. Anybody want to ask first? I already see a hand up. Matthew, and I saw it this time. Matthew, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't remember your first name. It says T. Proctor. Is it Tina?
Tina.
I'm Tina, yeah, thank you.
Tina, thank you. I'm terrible with names. I'd be curious to know what giving up one's white privilege would look like.
Ooh, okay, that is a big question, and it will look different in different situations. I'll just give some different examples. Stepping aside and creating, letting a person of color take a job that maybe you would have liked to have yourself. Trying to think of other examples. Well, for example, Serena Williams' husband, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, he created Reddit. He stepped down from his board position on Reddit and asked Reddit to fill that position with a person of color. So it could be also paying more in taxes to have more money go to create better funding for schools that are underserved, because we know that there are huge differences in the quality of education it could be getting rid of legacy admissions at Ivy League schools. Those are just some examples.
Thank you. Tom, did you raise your hand earlier?
Yeah, I did.
Tom Morrow. So I'm
Yeah.
going to Tom Morrow and then Tom Berry. So Tom Morrow, go ahead.
Hi, Tina. I'd just be curious to know what you think about the wealthy individuals in our country that David alluded to, that you alluded to, that basically are the powerful and own the K Street lobbyists and buy politicians. I'm curious what you think about a solution to that situation that is very real in our country.
That is tied in part to white power, but it's not limited to white privilege. And I mean, there are different kinds of reforms, right, with campaign finance, right, and breaking that campaign finance system, which now we do have new ways of funding people who are running for office, but that doesn't really deal with the power structures within businesses and, you know, other country clubs and other institutions.
All right. Thank you, guys. Tom Berry, did you still have a question? No. Ginger, go ahead.
I'd be curious to know how you feel stepping aside in a job promotes true equality between the races.
I don't think that stepping aside from a job opportunity creates true equality for races. Just like that. I do think that creating different opportunities for people to so I'm a teacher, so for example, having teachers of color in the classroom for students of color is very powerful. So I do think that it doesn't create instant equality, but it does create representation, which can be very powerful for people. So if a student has never had a teacher of color, if a patient has never had a doctor who is non-white, all of those create different interactions, different treatments, and visual representation for people who haven't maybe seen themselves in those positions.
Thank you.
That's well said.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so
I'm like looking around to see who's speaking all the time.
Payman?
Pejman, yeah.
Pejman.
Yeah.
Hi, Pejman.
I'm curious to know if you believe that we live in a meritocracy where people advance on their own merits and ought to, instead of on the complexion of their skin.
I do not believe we live in a meritocracy. I would like us to live in a meritocracy, but the reality is that people who have wealth have an enormous leg up, whether, you know, irrespective of skin color. People who have wealth have incredible access and opportunities that people who lack wealth don't have. And, you know, it begins with the schooling that you get, the tutoring you get, the studying for the SATs, the schools you go to, the connections you make. And that's not to say that people who lack wealth can't make it, but I think it's much harder for them. So I would like us to be a meritocracy. I think we pretend we're a meritocracy. I don't believe we are one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's do, we got Matthew, and then one more after Matthew.
Matthew, your microphone is not on.
You're muted.
Sorry. I'd be curious to know, with what percentage of millionaires do you think inherited money in the United States opposed to did it through meritocracy instead?
I don't know what the percentage is, and I imagine that many people who are millionaires and have worked very hard and have special talents and abilities. But when I think about how people get opportunities. Often they get opportunities through the education they have or through the people that they know. So for example, you get into USC and then you get connected with other people at USC and have a robust alumni network. And so do I think that people who are millionaires earned their wealth? Yes. But you need to have the door open to be able to get to the job, get to the internship. How many people who lack wealth can afford to go to college, first of all, right? 20% of kids in America don't have enough food to eat, versus to take the unpaid internship. Increasingly more and more, we're seeing that to get your foot through a door in a lot of places requires a degree of wealth.
Thank you. Let's do one more question for Tina. And we have Angel already has her hands up, sorry. Go ahead, Angel.
Hi, thank you. Tina,
Angel, can we see you? Or no?
You cannot see me. Nope, you cannot. I apologize.
Okay.
Next time. Tina, I'd be curious to know, you've mentioned, traditional education like college, etc., a few times. And I'd be curious to know if you find that there are opportunities for people who are oppressed with the lack of education that is or could be valued in the same way for those who haven't had traditional education ladders. So, for example, they have a PhD of the streets.
Angel, try to clarify that more succinctly.
Okay, I'm terrible at that.
Okay.
So I find value in lived experience when we're working with individuals or we're interacting with individuals from oppressed communities, whether it be racially oppressed, mental health, etc. And so I find value in the PhD of the streets, whereas some cultures or some people in society only find value in traditional education. And I believe that they're equal. Do you find that's something
that's one thing. Try to bring that into I'd be curious to know question. Can you do that?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I'd be curious to know if you find value in all walks of life of education and not just traditional education.
That's good.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And I think that some, not all, but some pathways to not all well-paying jobs and all wealth require people to have certain credentials from universities, for example. So do I think that those credentials all the time make someone worthier for the job? No. I think there's a lot of value in lived experience, but unfortunately for many jobs, you need the credential to get your foot through the door. And not everybody can afford to go to college.
That's good.
Or even go through a training program.
Thank you. Angel, by the way, somebody have their speaker on? Heard some background noise. Angel, you're like me, you're passionate, so no problem on the trying to clarify the I'd be curious to know question.
Thank you.
So who would like to go next to express their 2 minutes of thought around this topic? Anybody have some thoughts they want to share?
Can you remind me of the topic? I'm late.
Yeah, it's white privilege is a white problem and white people need to fix it. Am I right in saying that? That's the question, the clarifying question.
I'll go.
Okay, go ahead, Angel.
I think that there's a culmination of a lot of different avenues that are the problem, but my understanding comes from my own personal lived experience growing up in a biracial family, and just recently, about a year ago, was told that I had white privilege and white fragility. Now, I'm very familiar with equality, equitable leadership in our organization, and I was offended at that time primarily by the way it was being delivered to me. And it was, so I believe that there there's a huge lack of knowledge on how us as white-skinned or light-skinned individuals have white fragility and white privilege, and we are part of the problem, if not a primarily piece of the problem, because we get our feelings hurt and we get offended because we have to work really hard just as other people do. But what we're missing is the opportunity to realize that there are people that have to look at the world from a very different lens because of the color of their skins, and they are treated very differently. Even if we're not the ones, we still have white fragility when we start demonstrating our offense to having that privilege or fragility. And it was a huge wide eye-opener for me to look at it through the lens of, oh wow, yeah, I guess I am offended because I'm trying to protect my position, when the reality is I need to learn more about the people who are experiencing the oppression in a way that I can't ever begin to experience because of the color of my skin. So I started educating myself and talking to my friends about it, and my family, because I have biracial family. So yes, I believe we are part of the problem, if not the sole driver of the problem. And part of that piece is we get offended by even hearing that, which then we stop listening and we start arguing instead of hearing what people have to say and being compassionate.
That's good. Thanks, Angel. Who would like to ask a clarifying, I'd be curious to know, question around that? I see Ginger. Okay, Ginger. Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry, Ginger.
I'd be curious to know how if you've contemplated that perhaps you were offended because you value deeply holding people of any color at equality, and so when you were accused of this thing that you don't see as yourself, and you yourself apply something different, that you were blanketed with something, just as any racial action is a blanket.
So I'd be curious to know, what's the question? Specify the question.
I'd be curious to know if you think that you were offended, if you've thought about it, that you were offended because you aren't acting prejudice. That it offended you because you aren't that thing that you were called.
Yes. So I do believe that I was offended because my eyes were blinded to what they were trying to help me understand. And it wasn't about me personally. It was about the systemic oppression, the cultural oppression, and the larger picture, not the individual. And I think often that's what we get offended by, because I am all about equality. I'm with the land of the misfit toys, right? And I'm all about everybody's love and light. And when I heard this, one person delivered it one way and I was offended. The other person delivered it in the same day, in the same group, in a very different way, and I heard it differently. So I think delivery is also part of the problem, regardless of who's delivering it, and how I was willing to hear it and listen for the untold story.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Clarifying question?
Angel, I'd be curious to know if that difficult conversation led you to actions that you would have not done had you not heard that and had that conversation.
Good question.
Positive or negative actions is, I guess, my question. So at the time I was experiencing what I felt was reverse racism, because it was literally said by one of the presenters, I don't trust white women. And I was standing right there and I was offended by it because my brother and sister are half Black and we grew up in a very different culture. And I defended my position as like, listen, I don't understand why you would ever say something like that, because I love my family and I love my friends who don't have white skin. So I was offended by that. But my actions later, when my trauma reaction came down because my lid had flipped, I was then able to listen differently and respond differently and come to a place of, I want to know what that person meant and what that person experiences. And so, yes, I then educated myself in a very different way by talking to a group of people that I trust and could help me dig deeper to where that came from. And I run a nonprofit, and I work really hard at trying to be inclusive equitably across the spectrum. So yes, I did some homework and research, and I asked for feedback and for people to call me out on it if they saw me being fragility. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks, Dave, for the great question. Matthew, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question? Yeah.
I'd be curious to know if you think that any white person who disagrees with the concept of white privilege, if that is them being offended or white, an instance of white fragility.
If any white person disagrees with it, you know, I think it's all comes from the perspective of what are they disagreeing with for me, right? Like, what are they disagreeing with? I think it's a very complex and complicated thing to understand when you aren't immersed in equality or seeking it. So I think that it's really difficult. I don't know that necessarily disagreeing with it means that they're racist in any way. Just lack of knowing. And I guess what are they willing to do is explore more. And if they're not willing to explore more to seek to understand, then I would say that's a bit of a fragility notion, because they don't want to understand, which that is part of the systemic and cultural and historical problem. For those who don't understand, not necessarily being racist, but not seeking to understand to make change. That's my position on that.
Good. Thank you both on that. We'll do one more question for Angel, and we'll get on another opinion. Anybody else have a question for Angel? Okay. So who would like to go next for sharing their thoughts on this topic? I see Pageman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, so I would say that if the prompt is white privilege is a white problem and only they can solve it, I would completely disagree with that. I don't think white privilege is a problem, because I don't believe it exists in the way that we're defining it, or the media is, or society is in general. So I don't think it's on white people as a collective to feel guilty enough to correct the wrongs of their ancestors, many of whom weren't even alive during the times of slavery or Jim Crow or, before 1865. So I don't think that's a thing that white people as a collective to punish the collective white under the umbrella term would be, I think, racist in itself. And I do think there are privileges in this country. I don't think being white would be one of them. And even if it is, like I mentioned, my other two, I don't think it's high on that list. I think there are way more important privileges, being attractive, being tall, being right-handed, being wealthy, being able to speak and communicate. I think those privileges heavily outweigh the darkness or the whiteness of my skin. And if you're a good person and you work hard and you go to school, irrespective of your complexion, you will get far in life in the United States. That's it.
Thanks, Pageman. Okay, anybody who wants to ask a clarifying question around that? Hold on, I get my clock here. Sorry guys, I'm trying to set my clock up. Okay. Did Tom start hand up first? Tom Morrow?
I think so.
Go ahead.
Hey, I have trouble pronouncing your name, but Pejman?
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious what you think about the principle of restitution and righting wrongs for people, regardless if their ancestors were the ones that actually committed a crime against humanity.
So if you're curious to know my opinion on whether or not that should be applied, then no, I don't think the present day should be paying reparations or righting the wrongs of...
No restitution.
Or restitution of any inequity in society based on what happened before I was born.
Okay, thank you. John Schindler, I saw your hand go up.
I guess I'd be curious to know what how you think about the idea of acting in a socially just way. So what would constitute a person's actions in a socially just way within the context of race?
Just to follow the golden rule and treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Race or class or anything.
Okay, I see Angel, and then we'll go to Tina after Angel. Angel, go ahead.
Yes, I'd be curious to know if you're familiar at all with generational and historical trauma and how it affects DNA and how people see the world and interpret their experiences.
I'm familiar with the term, but if it's only applied to African Americans, I wouldn't agree with that, because that would imply that only African Americans were the recipients of trauma in history. As we know, 1/3 of Jews were killed. Japanese were in internment camps. I'm Persian. I'm the quote victim of the Iranian regime. I don't think playing the victim card is going to get you far in life.
Thank you. I didn't say victim, but thank you.
Thank you both.
I've got a question.
I think Tina, then David. Go ahead, Tina.
You talked about the golden rule, and I'm curious to know if you think that when you live in a society that individuals have any civic obligation to work on changing structures in society, or if it is people's only responsibility is to apply the golden rule in their daily interactions. So you had said you
try to get that in more. I'd be curious.
I'd be curious to know if you think that people living in a country have a responsibility to be civically engaged and try to change laws and practices that perhaps are unjust.
Yeah, so I mean, if I'm a citizen of the US and I see a systemic problem, and I mean systemic in the true sense, meaning that there's a law that discriminates X against Y, then yeah, of course. But I don't think that exists in today's US. Certainly 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago, you could say the same thing about women's rights to vote, African Americans' right to vote, own property. I don't think those laws are applied to today's America.
Thank you both. David.
Paige, I'd be curious if you think that Black people and white people are treated exactly the same in America today.
Treated by who?
By society.
At the institutional level or at the individual level?
All levels.
More or less, yes.
Okay. Anybody else clarifying question? I see Angel, and then we'll go to James.
No, that's old. Sorry.
Oh, that's old. Sorry, Fred. James, you're next.
Sure. Paige Man, I'd be curious to know if you think there's any merit in governments acknowledging past mistakes of maybe ancestors or issues or things that have happened with governments. For instance, I'm in Canada, and in the last week, our Prime Minister came out and acknowledged that there's systemic racism in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right? It's our national police service, the one that goes across. You know, in the past, our government has come out and apologized for residential schools.
James, can you try to clarify that into a question?
Yeah. Do you think there's merit in governments acknowledging there being systemic racism?
It's good.
I mean, if it exists in that country, yeah. But if I think you mentioned apologizing for previous wrongs. I don't think that's, appropriate use of our time. If that's the case, I think everybody in this room would be apologizing for something their ancestors did or their country did 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and would be sitting here hearing each other's apologies all night. So I don't want to do that.
Okay. We'll do one more question for Pageman. Anybody have clarifying?
I do.
Is that, well, I see Tina.
Angel. Oh,
Oh.
okay.
We'll do Angel and Tina, and then we'll go on to someone else. Go ahead, Angel.
I'd be curious to know if you have children and or family members you've ever had to teach them to be careful while out in the community because of the color of their skin, or be on guard and treat somebody respectfully because of the color of their skin. That's all.
I don't have kids, but in my family, no one's told me to treat a certain way because of the color of our skin. I mean, yeah, sure, if you're in a bad area, then, don't go out at 4 a.m. looking for trouble, or even walking down the street. But no, on the basis of color, no, it's more basis on the environment of where I'm at. And no, not on our collective family color, no.
Okay, and then Tina.
I would be curious to know when people of color speak about their experiences and say that they feel they have experienced different treatment because of the color of their skin, what you think about that.
If it's anecdotal, then I take it as an anecdotal piece of a story, just like if I can tell you a story about, the rude patient I had this morning, or so, I'm not going to put that on but if it's backed up by evidence and surveys, and I can see that, this percentage was affected by this, then I can look at it and say, yeah, it's not systemic, it's a widespread problem. But individual stories and just general grievances don't do much for me.
I'm going to ask a question, Pageman, because I love I really appreciate your ability to articulate your thoughts. So I'd be curious to know, based on what we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months in the justice arena with police officers and Black African Americans, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on what you perceive, if there's an issue there or not, what your thoughts are on that.
If you mean the shootings of unarmed African Americans, I don't think that's an issue. I think it's the same as unarmed whites, unarmed Asians, unarmed Hispanics. I don't think the police are systemically racist. I don't think the police force, the unions, are systemically going out and killing unarmed people because of the color of their skin. I think it has to do with socioeconomics, education, crime rates, and things like that. I don't think it's a reflection of their skin color.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to another. We're going to go for another. We're going to go one more opinion, and then we'll have some questions around it, and then we'll close up. So, who'd like to be our last thoughts? 2-minute thoughts for the day. I see Nima.
Yeah, can you do the question one more time?
Yeah,
prompt.
white privilege is a white problem, and white people need to fix it. Am I right?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, John, in that I don't see white privilege as the same way that the media is kind of portraying. It's kind of a 3-part question. So it's definitely not a white problem. If anything, it would be a Black or a person of color problem, because they're the ones who are affected. And obviously the last people, in my opinion, who should be fixing this problem are the people who started it themselves, if it really is a problem. So I kind of just think that, I lived in a few different places in my life, not just in the US, but across the world. And classism and what you're born into is a thing everywhere, And as crazy as it seems, and you wouldn't think it, but the US is actually, in my opinion, like the least racist country. I mean, we have so many people from so many different places, and even though in this day and age where everyone has an iPhone and there's like cameras on every ATM machine, and you see all this horrible stuff that goes on in the media, if like, I'm sure African Americans were treated so much worse 20 years ago, and even worse 50 years ago, and even worse 100 years ago. And, you know, like, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's getting better. Of course, no two people are equal. Life isn't fair, and it's getting better. But I also don't think that it's like systemically racist like that. There are definitely racist people in the U.S., but I just don't think that it's like that. You know, like, I don't think that it's. I mean, look at all of us. We're all having a conversation. We're all talking to each other, being respectful, and it's not like we're being forced to. Yeah, I'm mostly on Pejman's side with his arguments about all this. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Who would like to ask Neiman a clarifying question? Matthew, I saw you.
Yeah, good job. You're nailing it.
I'm nailing it.
I'd be curious to know what other countries you've lived in.
I've lived in Iran. I've lived in a couple countries in Europe, and I'm in Dubai right now. So, yeah.
I'd be curious to know what time it is over there in Dubai.
It is 7:15 a.m.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I think I saw Valerie next, and then Ginger. Go ahead, Valerie. I think you're on mute.
Hi, I'd be curious to know why you don't think that, or that you think things have progressed or that things have changed for the better versus like 20, 50 years ago when we're just watching the Let It Fall show that was on about Los Angeles, and that was 28 years ago, and you're watching Rodney King getting beaten so badly, and then here we are almost 30 years later, and you feel like we're just keep on repeating ourselves. And I'm just curious, you know, why you would say that we're getting better when it's just it's showing that we're not. It's repeating, and we're at the same point again.
Yeah, so it should be
Yeah.
clear, you know.
No, I mean, I think everyone got the gist of it. I think so. For example, Rodney King, back then there were no iPhones. There was some guy with a handy cam in his balcony or something who happened to be at the right place, right time, got on footage. There was probably that kind of stuff going on a daily basis in multiple cities across the US, you know, that like, so maybe like some small percentage of them actually got reported or documented. In today's age, I think we're batting like somewhere close to like 100, like, I mean 1,000, where it's like nothing can really go down without there being either a witness or being documented in some way or another. So, I mean, numbers kind of matter. I don't think that we're just doing the same thing. I think it's gotten far less than what it used to be. But, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Thank you. Ginger.
Hi, Nima. I'd be curious to know what you think about the idea that an individual can't feel that they're respected by another. They can't be given that respect. They have to assume it within themselves and feel their sense of place within.
An individual can't feel respect?
Well, that respect comes from what you feel within rather than from without. That you, for instance, that this idea of white privilege, that it actually, simply by the feeling of that you can't feel when somebody else of a different color is respecting you.
So what's the question? So I'd be curious to know, try to bring that into a succinct question.
That it's our own. I'd be curious to know what you think about if we have to, each color, each person individually has to assume responsibility for there being equality within the world and within a nation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and Pejman mentioned the golden rule. I'm a strong believer in that. I'm not particularly religious myself. But I mean, I really do believe in humanity. I think that it's sad that, you know, with all the information and all the things, all the history that humanity has lived through, that we still have to, you know, kind of bicker over these minute differences between people. And there are so much worse things that could happen to you than you being darker or lighter. And yeah, I don't know if I really answered your question, but I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You did. Thank you.
Tom Berry.
Nima, hi, nice to meet you.
You too.
Excuse me, I'd be curious to know, you'd mentioned that you know, that the United States actually you feel has done a very good job as far as equality and diversity, and you know that there are, you know, lots of people of color, you know, do well, but also have, you know, have been prejudiced against. But I'd be curious to know if you think that the fact that African Americans, to my knowledge, were the only ones who were brought to this country in large amounts as slaves for the purpose of being slaves. If that has any effect on maybe how they are treated by the society over and above other folks of color who may have come on their own by their own choice.
So how does that reflect how we treat them now, is your question?
Yeah, if that affects how African Americans are treated by society, if the fact that they came as slaves makes any difference between how maybe other people of color are treated in this society.
I don't think it plays a role in how we treat them. I think it definitely plays a role in how generationally it's affected their upbringing. I mean, obviously, if your dad or granddad was a slave, then his son, you know, wasn't taught the same things that an educated or even uneducated, but like, you know, someone that had the means to bring up a family would be able to do. So that obviously affects everything. You know, like you learn everything from your parents. School's probably like 5% of what you actually use, and you learn a lot from your parents, so it's important. Was your dad an alcoholic? Did he beat you? Was he there at all? Was your mom, you know, single? These things affect you way more than the color of your skin. But when the color of your skin is the reason that these things are absent, then 100% I agree with you. But we're fast forwarding to today where, I mean, there have been so many generations that have had, you know, a chance to maybe separate, like diverge from that path that's been set before them back during slavery. I don't know.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Anybody else want to ask a clarifying question for Neiman? Go ahead, James.
Nima, I'm curious to know if you believe or think that generational trauma has any effect in these communities that we've been talking about.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So, example in Canada, generational trauma, right? You have Indigenous groups that were taken and put in residential schools. It's been documented as a cultural genocide. So you have churches, white, raising, you know, hundreds of thousands of kids, Indigenous kids taken from their families, right? Sexually abused, right? Brought up as white Christians, don't know they're, you know, feeling this sense of, you know, no place in history, go out, you know, have a hard time dealing with these issues, right? Then, so they may alcoholism, whatever, and then that ends up, you know, affecting their families going forward, right? So you see it in generations down the road, right, from incidents that happened.
Does that help? Does that help with the question?
I 100% believe that that's a factor. I don't think that's a factor for only people of color. I think that's definitely a factor for white people too. I mean, that's a factor for any family, I think, that does something that's, like you said, like traumatic, dramatic, whatever, and it's going to affect their kids. And if their kids don't get rid of that trauma, by the time they're old enough to have their own kids, it's going to be passed down probably in one way or another. I think it's self-explanatory pretty much.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be for people of color, I think.
Okay, thank you. Pageman.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if the race relations, as you alluded to, has gotten better over the past 30, 50 years. Why do you think the media keeps harping on this and over sensationalizing these events in the past 10 years?
So I think in general, especially in the last 10 years or so, extreme views just fan a fire and they get more attention. You know, if someone says something that's just obvious or is just, boring, it's not going to get any likes or, retweets or whatever it is that, people are looking to do these days. Obviously the media gets paid based on viewers, so you can't say that the world is fine, no one's going to be watching your channel. And I'm not saying the world is fine, by the way. We have tons of problems. But yeah, I mean every segment of this whole thing, every player has their reason for playing the way they're playing. It's just I think if at the individual level, if you see where you fit in and you just don't bite and you do your own thing because you know it's right, then you can kind of just have this domino effect, hopefully, and other people will do the same thing. I don't think it's, I think the media makes it bigger than it is, but the reasons I think are varied for different people across different mediums.
Thank you. I'm going to, one more question for Pageman, and then we're going to wrap it up. Anyone have a clarifying question?
Can you hear me?
Hey, Brahmas. Yes. Good to hear you.
I have been watching and listening to what's going on, and I think we have crisis of definition in the beginning. We didn't define what white privilege is. We have not established the implication and impact of past actions. If you start in your kid and start eating hamburgers, and you start eating cheeseburger, by the time you are 18, you're going to be sick or diabetic. In this country, we started in a very sick way. Now that sickness is coming up. We have to deal with the impact. I don't know what it means to be a brown person. I know what it means to be a black man living as a professional, as a journalist in this country. I don't know what it means for a woman to give birth. I don't know the pain. I can't explain the pain that a woman goes through when she's giving birth. I can only empathize. So I can't speak for women and tell them, hey, you know what? That pain of birth is nothing. I can only empathize. Until you walk in a black man's shoes, you don't know the impact of past system on me. You can't have any, you can possibly not have any opinion that is inherent if you have one lived as a black person.
They promise.
Yeah.
What you said is a great statement of what you're. So what we did was, and I don't know if you saw the beginning, we had people give their thoughts, and then we have questions around it. So did you hear Neiman's thoughts? And did you have a specific question for Neiman? Like, I'd be curious to know.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know if generational activities that happen to black people, if it's have an implication now as it relates to employment, education, transportation, environmental justice, criminal justice implication. If all of the laws that were framed, I'd be curious to know if they have implication. Because nobody else, I'd be curious to know if all of the laws that were framed of exclusion still have impact on black people.
Good question. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they have impact, first of all, on everyone because they're laws and they're, they affect everyone. Some might disproportionately affect black people or people of color.
What do you mean by that?
But
What do you mean by that?
that, yeah, he's let him finish. Go ahead.
So, I mean, depending on the law, but let's say it could be anything from loans. It could be something about the criteria to get a business license. It could be what it takes to get into a university. It could be anything, you know. It's going to affect everyone, and then certain laws might affect people differently depending on the race, but not necessarily. They're not going to write it in the law that, oh yeah, if you're like Native American, you can't become a senator. But there are no Native American senators, you know. But I mean, you know, am I aware of it? Yes. But I think it's getting better. Do you think that we're in a worse place now than we were 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 200 years ago? Do you think it's the same? Do you not think that we're improving? Do you think that we can improve?
Okay.
Yeah. 100 years ago, you had bonnets,
Okay.
bayonet, and houses. You didn't have train and cars and airplane. So that's the wrong question to ask about 100 years ago.
Hey, promise.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to close. It's almost 8:30, but
All right. Maybe next
I was
time.
hoping, and we'll do this again, by the way.
Yes.
And I want you to come in and give your 2 minutes of thought so we can talk to you around those thoughts. So on the next one, I'm going to get a hold of you a couple days before. I'm going to say, promise, I want you to come on and share your mind so we can talk around it, because you have a lot to say about this.
Yes.
All right. I really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you, man.
Okay. So as we're closing here, guys, we heard a difference. Everyone has different thoughts of what's going on around us, the world around us, this topic we're talking about. And this 3-practice circle. And I'll put information on my Facebook page on where you can get more information on it. Some of us here have been trained in this, and we've done several of these. Before COVID, we did this in a live environment. I did this in a 30 people in a restaurant. One was on guns, one was on Uncle Bob's coming to Thanksgiving. He wants to know where you stand on the impeachment. So real provocative questions, but all done in a way of honoring one another, even though we might have a world of differences on how difference of our worldview and such in our experience in life. So I really appreciate all of you. All of your input was very welcomed and very well stated. Right now, what I'd like to do as we close is that there's somebody, they may not even have agreed with you, but there's something about them that you really appreciated. This is a good time to say, thank you to them specifically for what they may either their involvement, what they shared, or something that spoke to you or opened your eyes. So if anybody wants to start off with thanking somebody, go ahead. You're free to do that.
Benjamin, I want to thank you because I used to think exactly like you. I'm from Africa. I went to college in London, right-wing, Republican, conservative, wore myself from the pain of Black American until I became a reporter for a Black newspaper. So I just want to thank you for stating your views. And I am sure as you journey like I did 27 years ago, you'll come to a point when I was forced to be a system thinker and to look at system. I am not a liberal, not a socialist. I am pretty conservative myself, but I have realized that I've been to Jericho, find out exactly how things work. So I just want to thank you for stating your views eloquently, and but I hope someday we'll have a different conversation, so at least we can see from where some of us are coming from. Thank you.
Good. Go ahead, Tina.
I want to thank you, Robert, for facilitating this and for being brave to learn how to do this and manage it, because it's not always easy.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for telling us that you're learning how to do it and for taking that step and making it happen, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
I appreciate that. Ginger. Ginger, look like you're frozen. Are you?
I'd like to thank everyone for sharing tonight and all the different views. And Pager, I'd like to thank you for being very honest and clear about a viewpoint that might be kind of against the common social rhetoric thread right now. And you too as well, Nima.
Thank you.
That's good. And Ginger, I'm going to share. Ginger's a friend, and she goes, I'm coming, but if I have a difference of opinion, and if people gang up or whatever, I'm out of there. I go, it's not going to happen. I'm the referee.
Oh, I'll be honest. I'll share a small story. I commented on a guy's thread who is a black guy that I met in when I was going to SPU, and he's younger, but I sincerely enjoyed his company and him as a person, and we were friends on Facebook. And I made the mistake, I guess, of commenting that all lives matter, because to me, everyone, the most important thing is that we treat each other equally, and I'll speak to the golden rule like a couple others did. And I got kind of verbally attacked, and I unfriended him because I didn't want to be verbally attacked.
Yeah, there's a lot of heat going on. It's not just what's happening. Starts with COVID, people out of work, a lot of and what's happening here. And like I said, worldview matters. And depending on your worldview, this is a very, very sensitive subject. And so anyway, I can appreciate what you experienced. Anybody else like to say thank you to somebody? Diane?
I want to thank you, Rob, for putting this on.
Thank you.
And I can't wait for the next one. And thank you, David Ray Motter. I always love both of you.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Love you too. All right. Well, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, thank all of you for showing up. This is it's a very unique situation, and Rob and I and a few others that are that were on the screen, are taking this class, and I just hope that you really got something out of it, because I'm thankful. I don't even know Rob that well. We just got to know each other, but you are his friends and you came to support him, and I hope this gives you lots to chew on. I think that's the exciting part about this, is I guarantee you'll be chewing on this long after we get out of this, and you'll be thinking about things were said. So thank you all for showing up. And
we'll be doing some live ones. Obviously, it's not as easy to do the live ones when everyone's around the country, but and especially Dubai. But I wanted to especially thank everyone that showed up. Neiman Pageman, I really honor your honesty and integrity of sharing your view that probably was not the majority of you in this room, and that speaks well to who you are, the character of who you are, and one of the things about this three practices, we're never in here to try to convince somebody of our own worldview. It's really a room of freedom, and even in the midst of differing opinions, we learn something. We learn how people think. We learn how they process, how they see the world, and it really does stay with us. Like Tom said, you start processing some of these things. Your opinion may never change. We're the only ones. We're the directors of our own opinion, right? So some people can change their opinion, but that's up to them, not anybody else. So appreciate it. Any other thoughts and thank yous before I sign off? Go ahead, James.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for letting Canadian infiltrate in and bring some of my own kind of perspectives. I mean, I have a different perspective, sort of watching everything that's unfolding in the United States. I mean, I'm not there. I don't see everything, but I mean, the media is crazy, right? And I'm sure there's lots of bias in what I see. But thank you very much for letting me come on here and share my 2 cents and stuff as well.
James, always enjoy you, and of course we love our Canadian friends up north. You guys are always a part of us. Tina.
I'm from Seattle, and I think maybe some other people on the call tonight are also from Seattle. And just to the point about the media, right? Not to vilify the media, but look at a lot of different sources, because what's happening in Seattle is being portrayed in a lot of different ways, depending on which media source you look at.
True, and even within the show, what they say about who's involved varies depending on that. Thank you, Tina. Angel.
Yes, I just want to say thank you for a great group, to you, Robert. And I don't see everyone, so I couldn't see who else is your cohort referees. But I just want to say thank you. You guys did a great job. I'm really excited to see the next ones. And sorry I was late. And thank you for some of the very balanced, energetic, or energy in the way that people responded to the questions that they were being asked. There's a lot of balance that I saw, and it was very nice to be able to have a conversation and dialogue with all of you from all walks of life, to be able to have this without heated, heavy energy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just so you know, if any of you guys have a framing question or thought, or if you guys ever want to host one of these, there's plenty of us that would be happy to referee and be involved in a group like this. You can invite folks to it and schedule with us, and we'd be happy to do that. I'll let you know when I'm going to do this again. There's obviously there's unlimited amount of topics to discuss these days, and with a wide range of views. And I think we all can learn from everybody. And I think I really appreciate all of you coming on board here. You can hook up with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and I look forward to staying connected with all of you. Right?
Thank you, Rob.
All right, guys.
Hey, James, I just want to tell you that Brandon, who was on here earlier, is a Canadian as well. He didn't fess up to it, but so you weren't the only one in the room.
He's actually my cousin. He's the one.
Okay, gotcha.
So,
I was wondering about that, if there was a connection, but
yeah,
I didn't want you to feel all alone, you know. So
he actually lives about 3 blocks down from me as well.
That's great.
James, I've seen you on these before. I think you and Brandon have been on them before.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So anyway.
Cool.
All right. Thanks. And
Nice to meet y'all.
You guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Be well. Thank you.
Love your heart, man. Yes, Diane?
Rob,
Yeah.
I'm going to Montana on the 3rd.
I'm going to Montana on August 21st.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm going to Conrad during that time because I'm doing a funeral over there.
Oh, we're going to Whitefish and to Glacier. We leave the 3rd and come back the 13th.
I know, because your concert got canceled.
I know.
Was it McCartney?
Oh, well.
What was it, McCartney?
It's my 35th wedding anniversary.
But what was the concert you're going to?
We were going to go see Santana and Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh, that's right.
So they canceled it, but they didn't refund us. It's going to be rescheduled.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
What part of Africa are you from? Promise, can you hear me? You're frozen.
Say again?
What part of Africa are you from?
I'm Nigerian. 100%. My mom is I have Ghanaian lineage.
Ghanaian?
Also. Yeah, I have Ghanaian lineage from my grandmother.
Cool, I like that.
I've never been to Nigeria, but I've been to South Africa several times, in Zimbabwe.
Oh, yeah?
And I have a lot of Ghanaian friends.
Yeah, they're all over the world.
Yeah, they are. They're some really precious minister friends of mine. One lives here, Emmanuel Ziga, lives right here in Seattle. He's also got a little church, but he speaks all over the world. So next time you make your way up north, let's get together. Next time I come down there in Portland, I'd love to see you.
For sure. Yeah, let's do that.
We got a lot to talk about, and what you're doing for tell me your organization again, the voting thing.
League of Minority Voters. We're in 6 states. We're launching our national in October in DC.
Yeah.
So we have regional office in Bellevue now. We're going to launch officially in Washington State.
Awesome. And you're going to tell them who to vote for, right?
No. Thank you. Nice try.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well,
Nice to meet you, Promise.
yeah.
Nice to meet you.
All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks so much. Tom, thanks. Thanks, Diane. Say hi to your lovely husband. And Diane just lives, I could almost throw a rock to her house. Tom, thanks for helping referee and
Sure.
helping me organize. And of course, when you do yours, I'll invite some of these folks to your thing too in a couple weeks.
All right. Do you want to hang out for a minute and unpack, or are you okay?
Yeah, I can unpack.
All right.
Promise. Thanks so much, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bless you.
Yeah.
All right.
Bless you.
So Tommy, how's everything going on your end?
It's good. Let's see here.
Let me see.
There we go. All right. Yeah. I think it's just the two of us now.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, how did you feel? You were the guy on the hot seat. How did you feel?
I think for the most part, I did okay. The few clock mishaps where I forgot to put the clock on, or and a few times I let somebody run a little bit. I was sensitive to the topic and people getting their voice out, so I gave a little more room than I normally would have, and especially to Promise, because I had got a hold of him earlier. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted him to give his thoughts, but he did it at the end where we didn't have more time for him to, I would have put him on pause and say, sorry, I'll give you the next 2 minutes. But we didn't have 2 minutes to give him.
Right.
So, so I let him run further than I would have because of the topic and because, he didn't really understand fully what's going on. But normally I wouldn't have done that.
Right. Yeah, and that's, first of all, I think you did fine, and I could nitpick you all I wanted to all night, and you're going to turn around and have the same opportunity, because I'm sure I'm going to, we're learning.
What areas do you think I could help?
Well, I what you already brought up, I think, making those calls, there was times that people got in there. I'd be curious to know. I think you did a really good job of helping them but sometimes they just got out of hand, and again,
a couple
it's those
times
things.
I let them run further.
Right, and I'm sure I'm going to do the exact.
Yeah, but even people that are trained in this, like Angel, I was really surprised.
Right.
Because she went through some of the training, but she just went way. But she apologized. Right. I told her that's not a problem.
Yeah. And then and I'm going to try to figure out, and I'm going to talk to the gyms about this too. I think I know the answer, but that's the problem. I think finding the best way, because like I said, and I didn't mean to jump in on you on that, but I think David obviously didn't know. He came in late, so he didn't know the whole thing, and I was more afraid that he was going to either going to get frustrated because we were going to keep shutting him down because he didn't know the rules. Yeah. So like I said, if I stepped in on that one, I apologize if I shouldn't have done it that way. But I felt
I don't think he was offended.
No, I mean, for you more than him. I think he appreciated being told, but I also didn't want to, I didn't want to step on your toes as the ref, but I think he didn't understand what was happening. And once he did, then he was able to do it, and that was really good.
He was able to play, yep.
And I think that kind of happened with Promise a little bit. I don't think he really quite understood.
He was there the whole time, but apparently he just didn't understand.
Right.
And I think he did get a little triggered in his worldview because of, Neiman and Pageman a little bit at the end there, and even his thank you was,
it was a teaching moment.
Yeah, thank you, but I hope you see my way in about 25 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought it was overall good. There were certain people I thought was going to show up, didn't show up. And these other people, some of them I don't know. I don't know Pageman. I don't know Neiman. They may have came off Dave Dahl's invitation.
Right. Well, and I was wondering was it
Ginger?
No, is it the James? Is it James? No,
the Canadian?
Yeah, I was wondering because I kept looking at him going, he's got to be connected to Brandon. But I took a chance on that when I said.
I think you've seen him like I have on at least one of the other.
Yeah, But so I just took a chance on that just to say, just to kind of tease him a little bit, but also to make sure he didn't, so then I was just like waiting for that shoe to drop. He goes, well, Brandon's my cousin. I'm like, oh man, I'm thinking, I knew they knew somehow they knew each other somehow, but that was fun. It was fun to hear that. So no, I think it was.
I thought it was good. I could tell Ginger it's pretty easy to read people. I mean, it's pretty clear from the beginning, what she didn't know that when you, in this moment, and I told my sister the same thing because she's from Kansas City. I said, we all know all lives matter, okay? But when you say that to a Black person, you're discounting what they're trying to say about Black Lives Matter. Right. So you're basically offending them. So what she did without knowing it, when you say all lives matter, is you're offending those people that are for Black Lives Matter.
Right. Right.
So
and I think
it's all over her.
Yeah. And then hopefully this opens the door for things because I think that in a way, to be able to say all lives matter or to be able to say, I didn't understand why they were so upset. I mean, that's part of white privilege right there. I mean, and again, I think David.
What was that word that she was using? That's white privilege and white fragility?
Fragility, yeah.
What does that word actually mean?
White fragility is how they define.
Fragility.
Yes, fragility. Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
There's a book out on that.
Yeah. And so that whole idea of, if someone says, "Hey, you have white privilege," and and the white person who falls apart and screams, "No, I don't," and I'm being attacked, and now I'm the one who's being yeah. But see, that was the piece that was interesting. We kind of skirted around it, and that was fun to watch. Not fun, sorry, but it was interesting to watch. People use systemic a little bit, but no one really came out and said, you know what? Yeah, you're right. There are good cops. There are good African Americans. There's bad African Americans. There's good Polish people. There's bad Polish people. But what really the case is here is that we can prove that there's a systemic issue that and when I asked about that, that Blacks are the only ones, to my knowledge, that were brought over in mass to be slaves. So when a Persian person comes over, and I didn't ask them how much money they had when they got here. There's a stereotype right there. But when they came over and overcame things, that's very different than a group of people who who
and
came
then
here.
Certainly they've had to, especially with Islamophobia, they've had to face something.
Sure.
One's obviously a doctor. He talked about patients, so
right,
maybe in a whole different level of ideas, right, than Neiman. But and who knows? I don't know. Neiman's in Dubai. That's a pretty cool place to be. But it's interesting because the systemic problem, we can't legislate racism. You have people that don't like people from Italy or China or Middle East and Black people, but systemically from a leadership and accountability perspective, there is white privilege and there is racism, and there's not enough accountability measures that have policed that whole idea until now. It looks like change is happening. But I mean, did you see the full testimony of that Atlanta thing?
No, I have not seen that.
Oh, it was very clear after you see all the video evidence. He not only shot the taser at him, which you're not supposed to, apparently I didn't know this, Atlanta law is you're not supposed to shoot tasers at anyone that's running. They're supposed to be coming at you, then you tase them, or facing you. So you don't run, and then the other piece of it, I think probably they could injure. The other piece of it is when he shot that guy, one bullet bypassed him and hit another car. There was another car that you couldn't see in the one video right in front of where that guy was running. And so the three people in that car their lives were in jeopardy when the officer took the shot. So there was a lot of wrong thing doing. And then they have on video, immediately after he shot him, he goes there and kicks him. Guy's on the ground dying, he kicks him. And the other officer comes and stands on his shoulder while the guy's dying. It took them over 2 minutes before they even decided to think about CPR. So there was a lot of aspects of that showed intent. And they never did ask him, they never did tell him, we're going to place you under arrest for DWI. They just grabbed him. So they had this nice 41-minute conversation. He was willing to take a breathalyzer. He took it. And while they were behind him, they grabbed him without even telling him that they were going to arrest him. So a drunk guy in a situation with white police, with all the stuff's going on, he reacted poorly. Obviously, he resisted, but and grabbed the taser gun. A lot of things went wrong, but they also did a lot of things wrong.
Right. Right.
And he shouldn't have died. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate you, Tom.
Hey, no, I'm happy to do it. This is good. This is good practice for me.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to helping you and getting a lot of good discussion yours as well.
Good. All right. Have a good night, sir.
You too, man. Talk
All
to
right.
you soon. All right.